My name is John Kalalal. I am Executive Director at XEd, headquartered in Singapore with offices in Middle East, India, Southeast Asia. We are one of the largest provider of customized executive education for senior leaders. The topic for today is how to increase your impact and influence in 60 days. And to take you through this journey, we have Professor Stephen Sonsino. Hi, Stephen. Such a privilege introducing you. Stephen is fellow in the Center of Management Development at London Business School. Apart from LBS, he is visiting faculty at several top schools, including HEC Paris and even ISB, where I first met him almost a decade ago. Stephen is best-selling author of several leadership books, including The CEO's Journey, Reinventing the Future, and my personal favorite, What's Your Legacy? Stephen, thanks for agreeing to do this. Even before you start, here is a question which you may choose to address. When we were scheduling this session a few months ago, I remember both of us chatting about it one evening. It was still pre-COVID era. The question to you is, how is this topic relevant or not relevant in the current scenario where we all working from home, managing teams, customers, stakeholders, all from home? Over to you, Stephen. Would love to hear from you.
Thank you, John. And thank you also to our hosts for today, People Matters, and Reshma, I know you're in the background there. So thank you very much. And thank you for hosting XED and for hosting me today. John, you're very, very right. We need to address the issue that we all know. Why are we here? We're here online as opposed to in person because of this dreadful disease that's striking the world. And so we can't ignore that. We can't ignore that situation. But you know, I was reading while I was having time off, a wonderful book by a guy called Thomas Friedman. I'll put a link later on. And it's a book about what happened during the last Great Recession, 2008, 2009. And the book is called Thank You for Being Late. And I just want to read you a quote from the very opening of this of this book. The guy is saying he was due to meet somebody at this difficult time, and the guy was late. And he said, "Thank you for, I'm sorry, I'm late." And Thomas Friedman said, "Where is it?" He said, most importantly, I needed this pause. I had connected a couple of ideas I'd been struggling with for days. So no apology was necessary. Thank you for being late. John and everyone, it seems to me we've been gifted an opportunity. It's not an opportunity we wanted, but it's an opportunity nevertheless to pause and to reflect on what is most important. Of course, what's most important is our family, our friends, our health, and that we continue to stay well. So please follow the government advice around social distancing and around personal hygiene. These are incredibly important. And you may know that here in the UK, I'm speaking to you from London, that our own Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is in the intensive care unit of the hospital just across the River Thames because he has contracted coronavirus. This is a disease that takes no prisoners. It will strike anybody. So please take great care over the days and weeks to come. But does this mean that this webinar is irrelevant? And I would say far from it. I would say it's even more relevant now than it was when we designed it, John, because it's about increasing your impact and influence, and particularly over the next 60 days or so. Well, that 60 days becomes very, very relevant now. I want to just show this item, though, this first slide, because you may have questions as we go through. As you've already noticed, I speak incredibly quickly, and I apologize for that. I hope your ears can listen as fast as I can talk. But please type your questions into the chat box that's there on your screen. And what we will do is John will pull me kicking and screaming from the platform to make sure we have enough time at the end to deal with the questions that you have. And I hope that works for you. I'll put this slide up again a little bit later on so that just as a reminder to type some questions into the chat. I think if you can see the slide that I have up here on my screen, it is a famous bridge. And it seems to me, John and everyone, that we are on a bridge between how the world used to be and how work used to be, how life used to be, and the life still to come. And we don't know exactly what that's going to be like. But in this time, let us take time to pause and reflect on our own personal impact and the influence that we have. And partly I want to share with you a framework that I call the Leadership Brand Blueprint that I think will give you some ideas for how to do that. But let's take a pause to reflect on our own personal impact and influence. And a lot of you as HR directors, as leadership development personnel, training, HR, wherever you are in the business, a lot of you will have personal and professional knowledge that you could share at this time. So I urge you to share what you know to help those men and women around you to have some comfort in the current situation. But let me make a start. I want to ask you some difficult questions in this short time that we have together, because this short time we have together is a bit of a luxury, but let's embrace that. I want to, though, not make it an easy time for you. I want to hold the mirror up to you, if you'll let me, and ask you some difficult questions about your history, about, as John said, your legacy. And the first question I want to ask you is this one. Is your best work behind you? Because if your best work is behind you, then we should just pack up and go home. But if your best work is still to come, then there is everything to play for in this time. There is everything to play for in looking at our own experience, at our own skills, and spending a little time today and in the days to come to reinvent ourselves. So I ask you this question: is your best work behind you, or is your best work still to come? If, as I hope, your best work is still to come, then I think this webinar will be very, very useful to you as I share my framework that'll help you to increase your influence and impact. Before we get into the framework, just as the last few people come into the webinar, I want to share with you a little manifesto, if you like, a few thoughts on why I think this topic is important to us all right now. And when you look at your own business, you look at your own company, you do some analysis, some external analysis of what's going on in the external world, what's happening in the external environment. You look at what your customers are doing, you look at what your competitors are doing, and out of that external analysis comes some idea of what your business strategy is. So we do this in normal times. So now, with this pandemic running riot around the world, then the external environment has changed completely. What our competitors and customers and competitors are doing has changed completely. And what your new business strategy will be when we go back to the workplace will change. It's not enough to say we'll go back to the workplace and it will be business as usual. It won't. Because, and this I think is a key point that I want you to take notes. I hope you've got some means of taking notes. Please write this down. We are all startups now. We are all startups now. No matter whether you are a government agency, a large multinational, international, global corporation, a small entrepreneurial organization, whether you are self-employed, whether you're a consultant, wherever you are in the business, we are all startups now. And so we have this period before the business restarts to reflect and to think, what are the levers that I can use to increase the impact I have to help my business restart on an amazing footing when this is all over and behind us? So what I want to have you think about is, what are those three levers? And you know this if you've been on any of my workshops before, or if you've been with XED, or if you read material around the People Matters site, you know that the culture of the organization that you're in and managing change is incredibly important. It's a very important lever to how you make an impact in the organization. The second lever of extreme importance is how you mobilize the groups and teams around you. How can you help the teams and the men and women and the businesses around you to have even more effective groups and teams? And today, what I really want to concentrate on is you. Because how you lead, how you make a personal impact, how you influence others is the first of these three levers. And it's the starting point. It has to be the starting point in a startup organization. And if you are in an organization and you're going to go back on day one, what are you going to do? Clean your desk, clean the workspace, clean the oil rig, clean the wherever you are? That isn't going to do it. We have to go back to work, and we haven't got the luxury of a lot of time before we have to get people mobilized again. So this is a session that will help you both now and in the future, because I want to help you look at yourself and how you can increase impact and influence. And I use a very, I think it's helpful, but it can be a frightening tool. In the UK, the Institute of Chartered Accountants have cornered the market in financial education. So if you're in accounting or finance management, you will know the Institute of Chartered Accountants. And they produced this booklet. It's a guideline. It's a piece of due diligence. If I was going to buy your company, your organization, I would have to look at a couple of things before it was a good bet for me. And the things that I would need specifically to take a look at are the return on investment, the income growth. And tell you what, in this report, which is available on the internet, by the way, go take a look at it, from the Institute of Chartered Accountants, 40% of a firm's superior return on investment and 35% of its income growth in the future stem from the strength of the chief executive and the management team. Now, if you are a manager, if you have a team of people that you lead in this organization that you serve, if you work for yourself, you are someone who serves other people. In my book, you are a member, maybe a virtual member at this time, but a member of the management team. So management leadership is incredibly important, and you make an astonishing difference to the firm. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. So I want you to be absolutely crystal clear that you and your leadership abilities, your leadership skills, your leadership experience make a massive difference to the future, not only of your self-employed firm, of your middle-sized organization, of your government agency, but we're talking here about the future of India. Because when this economic lockdown is lifted, we will want all of the firms in India to have a massive, massive impact. And each of you on this call can play a massive, massive part in rebuilding our economy. So please, please take this extremely seriously. Please continue to learn how you can become an even better leader than you already are, because you have an impact, not just only on your own economy and your ability to serve your own family, but your ability to serve the organization and your ability to serve India Inc. That, for me, is crystal clear reasons why this is a great time to be having this webinar. If you have any questions about this or where to find some of these documentation, please post those questions in the chat. If I can't answer all the questions at the end of this session, then I will answer them online for you, and we will make sure that we get that material to you. I met my wife, change of direction here. I met my wife on when I was at university, and we were in the student drama group. And I wanted to say to you before we get into the leadership brand blueprint that if you are thinking, why do I need to bother about influence and impact? Well, it's because you are on stage all the time. Before this pandemic hit, people are watching you. People were watching you like a hawk, in the same way that you watch your colleagues, the same way that you watch the men and women above you in the organization. You are on stage all the time. And as I said, we've been given this wonderful opportunity that we didn't want, but it's an opportunity to reflect on how do you do your role. You are an actor on the stage, not pretending to be anybody else, but you are being yourself on this stage. Here's you in your role, if you like. You inhabit this role. Take you out of the role, you move on to another role within the organization or to work privately or to another part of the government. And the role remains, the role stays in place. So here's you in your role. somebody else comes in to take your role, the role will stay the same. But you in your role, the only value you add is how you do the role. I don't want you to become too obsessed in this time with what to do. What do we do now? I want you to be thinking, how can I take these steps? How do I lead? Because that's the big game changer from this moment on. I want you to obsess about how you lead. And a very famous jazz singer, my father gave me a love of jazz music because he would play it all the time when I was younger. And you may not know this woman. If you do, type her name in the chat. I'll pick it up later on. But this woman is Ella Fitzgerald, and she sang 70 or 80 years ago this wonderful song. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's what gets results. So I want you to burn this idea across your brain. Burn this idea across your forehead. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's what gets results. If you are a person doing a role and there's somebody doing a very similar role, the person who gets the greatest impact is the person who does that role, who tackles that role in a much better, much more effective way, using those three levers we talked about earlier: the culture and how you change the organization around you, the groups and the teams that you work with, but also you yourself. How you lead yourself is a critical lever moving forward. And as Ella Fitzgerald says, it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's what gets results. So this is just part of my manifesto moving forward. If you come to London when this is over, when travel is lifted, the bans are lifted, I want you to come and find me and we will grab coffee in the Quad at London Business School. It's my spiritual and intellectual home. And in the Quad, you'll see, and I hope you can see it, this bronze statue. It's a huge thing. You can see there's a bench behind this person. That just tells you how big this is. It's a bronze of a book bound to this guy's head. I think it's a guy. With these steel cables, and doesn't look too happy about it, to be honest. We will sit and we'll look at this bronze statue, and I tell you, it haunts me. So please seek me out. Send me a message when you next come to the UK. We will take a look at this together because it haunts me, and it haunts me. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, by the way. So do type your thoughts into the chat. I'll pick up on some of those later on. What does this make you think when you see this? And why is it in the Quad at London Business School, right in the heart of a place where MBA students crossing the Quad every day from class to class, executives who come for executive education, government ministers who come to the school? It's you cannot miss this in the center of my community. And why it makes me so nervous, why it haunts me is, well, it's a bronze called Listening to History, and it was created by Bill Woodrow, and it was gifted by one of the governors of the school to our school. And this idea of listening to history, that's very important, that we listen to the past, that we review what was successful in the past. But these times, these crazy times have changed everything. So I want you to be thinking, listening to history, listening to the past and the way we used to do things may be powerful. They may be very well documented, but they will blind you to the possibilities of the future. You bind the book of the past, how we used to do things, tightly to your head and stick firm to the rules, the things that we used to do. The future is blind to you. So I urge you to be thinking, the history will not save us at this time, and it will not save us as we move into the future. And when I first came to London Business School and saw this, it reminded me of that amazing book that many of you will know from Marshall Goldsmith, that amazing book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And that, listening to history, what got you here won't get you there, it really sprang to my mind as a theme for this webinar. Because if you are successful, then you keep on trying the rituals and routines, the things that you did in the past that made you successful. The thing is, given the current times, these things, the things that made you successful in the past, will not make you successful in the future. So I think that is a pretty good manifesto for what I want to cover. I think most people have now joined us, and I can make a start on the core content of this. But before I do, let me share with you that I was teaching at the Indian School of Business, and I don't know if you've been recently, but there are lecture theatres sort of back to back, and I was teaching. I could hear this voice in the other lecture theatre just behind me, and I went out in the break time, and I discovered that there in the lecture theatre behind me was Marshall Goldsmith, the author of What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So I was able to interview him and to talk about this issue of how do we continue to improve ourselves as leaders. And I also managed to get some time with him personally. We were both there for a good week. So we dined together in the evenings, and we chatted. And he has written, get this, he's written 35 books. I mean, I've written a dozen, nearly 15. And you know, how he achieves the teaching and the coaching that he does and still manages to put out 35 books, heaven alone knows. So I asked him, how does he stay at the cutting edge? And he told me something that really made a difference to how I work. And I want to share that with you now, because what he said, I think, is very, very pertinent to what I want to share with you today. He said how he stays at the cutting edge is, well, you have to reinvent yourself, he said. And I love that. I love that idea. You have to reinvent yourself. And I kind of got it immediately, that you have to constantly look at your skills, your experience, and think, what do I want to do now? And let me give you a very quick example of that, I guess. If the dean at London Business School or any of the other business schools that I work with says, oh, Sonsino is quite good doing X, let's keep Sonsino doing X. Well, in 5 years' time, I don't want the dean to be saying, oh, Sonsino is a safe pair of hands, let's give him this project. 10 years from now, Sonsino is a safe pair of hands. I need to keep reinventing myself. I need to keep bringing new ideas, new ways of working to the workplace and to the students that I work with, to the consultants that I work with, to the HR community, to the L&D community like you that I work with. So I want you to be thinking, how can you at this time reinvent yourself? I need you to tattoo this across your forehead. Reinvent yourself. I asked Marshall, it sounds great. I get it. I really, really get it. But how? How do I do that? How do I reinvent myself? And he gave me 2 additional pieces of advice, which I'll share with you now. He said, firstly, you've got to change your story. I hope you're taking notes, guys. He said, you've got to change your story. And secondly, he said, you've got to build a brand. You've got to build a brand. And I just love this idea. And these 2 strategies have governed my research over the last 4 or 5 years. And we'll touch on changing your story later on. But what I want to do now is focus on this issue of building a brand. How do you build? How do you reinvent yourself? Because it's not easy. Do type your questions in the chat as we go through this, because I'm going to race through these questions, this blueprint, very, very quickly. And I want to make some space available at the end if you have any particular questions. So here is the core of what I want to share with you today. In terms of building a brand, we're looking at your leadership reputation. And this is a great moment. This time while we're struggling with the coronavirus pandemic, this is a great time. I want you to ask yourself, well, who are you? This is about your leadership reputation. And here's the first question. Please, please write this down. I will share my slides with you, but I urge you to write these questions down. I find that the very act of writing things down helps me to recall them later on. So the first question I want to put to you is, what are you known for? What are you known for? What 2 to 3 things are you known for? And let me tell you this, it's nothing to do with your job description. When, let me ask you, when people call you, why do they call you? Because if it's for our technical professional skills at this stage in our career, we're lost. If we are known for our technical professional skills, even though I'm finding this quite hard to tell you, because I know some of you are extremely senior in the industry, in HR, in leadership development, in learning and development. If we are known as subject matter experts, it's game over, actually. We need to be known as leaders, people capable of turning around a tricky situation, people capable of turning around a difficult team, people in the aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic of rebooting and relaunching not only the leadership skills of the organization, but every skill in the organization, whether marketing, engineering, R&D, or whatever sector you serve. You need to be a phenomenal leader when we get back, because we have to make so many things start up again. We are all startups now. So I want you to ask yourself, what are you known for today? Looking back over your history and your career, what are you known for? Because that has to change. So here's my second question to you. What do you want to be known for this time next year? If we had another webinar, I'm not promising anything, John, but maybe it'd be cool to kind of get back together again a year from now when all of this is over and see how far we've come. Let me ask you this question. What do you want to be known for this time next year? And it's probably only going to be one or two more things. What are you going to do? What are you going to be known for this time next year? I used to only have these two questions, and people would say to me, it's about building my brand or reinventing myself. And I get that, Steve, but what do I do? How do I reinvent myself? How can I increase my influence and impact over the months and years ahead? So I've got some extra questions for you. And the third question is, where do your current projects challenge you? The projects that you were doing immediately before the lockdown, where do your current projects challenge you? Because it could be in those areas where you're struggling, where you're grappling with the work that needs doing. If we're honest with ourselves, actually, I'm struggling with this. I don't quite get this, or what this is for, or how I should do this better. Maybe there's an opportunity there for you to study that, to get even better at it. We have to have the humility. We have to have the humility to say, I don't know as much about this strategy or topic as I should, and to learn. We talk a good talk about being a learning organization and about being lifetime learners, but sometimes some of the people I bump into, you guys are all fine, by the way, on the webinar, you're all absolutely fine. But sometimes I bump into people and they feel that they have to have all the answers. Now, that's not tenable in this current situation. So let me ask you this: where do your current projects challenge you? And moving forward, you've got to do something about those. So be honest with yourself. One of the things I suggested we would do on this webinar is that we would make an honest assessment of your leadership expertise and skills. So I want you to look back and look at the current things, the things you're doing immediately before the lockdown, and ask yourself, where do your current projects challenge you? And to do something about that. Another question for you. Please write this down. What new things have you learned in the last 60 days? Let's park the coronavirus for a moment. But what new things have you learned in the recent past? I say the recent past. 60 days is a very powerful number, and I keep using it because if you have to look back a year, you actually can't remember what new things you were learning a year ago. You can't remember what new things you were learning 90 days ago. The things that you learned yesterday, that's easy. The things you learned last week. But 60 days ago, over the last 60 days, it's a useful chunk of time to reflect back over. What have you learned? Because my friends in project management tell me that when we get to the end of a project, people are so busy to get onto the next thing. This was pre-lockdown. People are so busy to get onto the next thing that they would say, that seemed to go all right, folks. Should we move on to the next thing? You need to slow yourself down. You need to stop and take recognition of what new things you've learned. And this crazy time we're in, this is a fantastic opportunity to reflect on what new things were you learning before the lockdown. And also, again, what new things are you learning during this lockdown? Because I tell you, the reflections that I'm having about the value that I'm having, and I'm sitting in my home studio and thinking, what can I really do? Today here with you, I'm really feeling that I'm adding some small value because I'm working again. So please, share your knowledge and your experience with others. But thinking about you personally, what new things have you learnt in the last 60 days? Let's move on to the next question. I want you to also be thinking about the people that you have met in the past? What important contacts have you made in the last 60 days? You might be thinking that during this lockdown, you can't make contacts. Well, there's an amazing tool called LinkedIn. I urge you to take a look at that. I'll say a little bit more about LinkedIn later on. But what important contacts have you made in the last 60 days? Because you're not, how can I put this? When you're involved in the day-to-day, doing the work, implementing projects, you may forget about your network. But you need to be constantly building your network for the next project, building your network for the next role that you take on within the organization. You're building your next network. There was a wonderful book I saw at the airport on my flight back in from India, as it happens. I stopped at Heathrow and looked in the bookshop, as I always do. And there was a wonderful book called Your Network is Your Net Worth. And I love that. I love titles of books, by the way, if you can't already tell. Your network is your net worth. And I love that idea. If you are not consciously, proactively building your network, even now, your network is dying. The network is fading away. When you email someone or you call them on their mobile, the email bounces because they've moved. The phone is dead because they've handed their mobile phone in. So I want you to be thinking, what important contacts have you made in the last 60 days? And get in touch with them. How's it happen? What's going on for you? What's been happening? How are you? Important contacts, stay in touch with them. Please stay in touch with your important contacts. And be thinking, what is your strategy for building contacts going forward? No matter where you are, even if you're a solo entrepreneur, if you are a supplier, a contractor to a large organization, you still have the opportunity now to extend your personal network. Reach out on LinkedIn. I was just checking on LinkedIn. Your name popped up on my dashboard. Worth connecting here. A very simple outreach. And if they are in your industry, or if they are finding some time to explore new providers, new suppliers, that could be a really useful thing to be doing. So what important contacts have you made in the last 60 days? And be thinking, what important contacts will you make in the next 60 days? Let's go to the next question. This is, I think, a big issue for me. I'll leave you to just read this for a second. What does your personal visibility program look like? When I work with the people in India, people in the Middle East, people in Hong Kong and Singapore, face is very important. Our ego and preserving face is extremely important. And yet I am asking you, what does your personal visibility program look like? I believe that we all need to be our own PR agent, our own authentic public relations expert, because you can have visibility within the organization that you serve. You can have visibility nationally. India is a massive, massive market and very, very switched on in online terms. People Matters is an amazing digital network. I hope you are exploring People Matters and taking part in the forums there, because that is a great way to not only answer questions and to serve the other men and women in the community, but also to build your own visibility. You can have visibility globally. So many of the companies in India are true global players. I don't know if you're in a global firm, but you're not just in Indian firms. You're in Indian firms that play globally. And even if you are a small supplier, you need to be aware of what are the global technologies and expertise that you can make a part of your daily service offering. Also digitally, you can have a digital presence. And that's why I mentioned LinkedIn. I mean, one of the things that I do is I make sure that I buy domain names, because when people Google me, I don't know, do you do this? Do you Google yourself? Do you Google yourself to find out what's out there? You should, actually. It's a really good idea. But what I want you to be thinking about is anybody who comes to meet you in the future, anybody who has a connection request from you on LinkedIn, they're thinking, who is this person? So they'll Google you, they'll find out who you are, they'll look at your LinkedIn profile. Thing is, what will they find? So you could get a domain name. Many Indians have similar sounding names, so make sure you've got a unique name. I would urge you to think about getting the .com domain name if you want. By the way, on LinkedIn, there's a big button that says available for work or open for work. Make sure you click that button off. Toggle that button off. I think it's down the bottom left-hand side somewhere. You don't want anybody in your organization thinking you're looking for work using LinkedIn. You're just using it to network, to find other ideas, to find other people of interest. So make sure that you are visible, not just in the organization, globally, you are also visible digitally. Because when somebody Googles you, as Google you they will, what if they find nothing? What if they can't find you? Because that significantly tells people that, well, this person hasn't done anything that sits there on the internet. So I think wherever you are in the organization, you don't need your own domain, but you could use LinkedIn. I mean, today, it's a service that is on almost everybody's machine. Microsoft owns it. Forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn. Some of you may have a company edict that says nobody should be on LinkedIn because you're going to, we're going to lose our best people. You're going to lose your best people anyway, firms. So please put LinkedIn on your to-do list. If people find your LinkedIn profile, at least make sure it's up to date. Put your latest work on it so that people know that you have attention to detail and that you are someone at the cutting edge of your profession. So I could go on and on, but please update your LinkedIn profile. Make sure it's got the latest information about you. Share your passion. Don't make it look like a resume. Don't make it look like a CV. Don't make it look like a Vita. Make it look like a website. So put in some of the projects you're working on. I'm passionate about my company. I'm passionate about this topic. And I'm looking for other like-minded men and women who can also share their passion for what it is I do. Reach out for pro bono consulting or whatever. But please take your personal visibility seriously. I want you over the next 60 days to update your LinkedIn profile if you haven't already, to consider preparing a website if you're a consultant or a thought leader. Thought leaders, and I believe all of us in HR and L&D are thought leaders, and we'll maybe talk about that later or another time. So I want you to be thinking, what is your personal visibility program? How are you going to become even better known than you already are? Let's go to another question. When people are thinking about building their reputation for the future, when you're thinking, if you like, about maybe even redoing your resume and Vita, not so that you can get other work, by the way, but as a exercise in looking at what you've achieved in your life so far, ask yourself this question: what awesome projects did you complete this last year? Not just the trivial little things that you did, but what awesome projects did you complete this year? And it may be that you're doing small scale local work. I'm working with a large oil company at the moment, and they have people on oil rigs. So awesome projects are doing my job safely, but awesomely safe. That would be a way of looking at this. But what awesome projects did you complete last year? I think if you look back through your diary, if you had to look back through your phone and go through the Outlook thing, look through all the meetings that you had, that to me is not an awesome project. An awesome project is what is in your head. I did these amazing projects last year. How can I extend them in this year going forward? What other awesome projects can I do? So look back to measure yourself. Honestly rate the work that you've done in the past year. This is not an annual appraisal. This is not an assessment. We're not going to share this with our managers, but honestly appraise the work you did in the last year. Was it awesome? What awesome projects did you complete this year? And you clearly know that what I'm going to say in this next slide is this killer question. What one awesome project will you complete in the next 60 days? And I want you to start now. What one awesome project will you complete in the next 60 days? Something that will serve your business, something that you personally are passionate about, something that will have some aspect of leadership, perhaps HR or learning and development, L&D. How can you share your expertise, your thought leadership in a way that positions you as a leader? And one of the things you might consider is writing short articles in this time that we have. On LinkedIn, you can write these articles or articles rather than posts, where you say, this is what we need to be doing. Because we're all startups now, we need to be thinking about this. Inspire your people, share stories, positive, uplifting stories about what it is we're going to be doing when we get to the other side of the bridge, when we re-enter the workforce, when we re-enter the real world again. What one awesome project will you complete in the next 60 days? And while the coronavirus is with us and while we're in lockdown, that 60-day period could well be the amount of time that we're in lockdown, that we are potentially working alone, but connected via the internet. So please network over the internet. Join me on LinkedIn. It'd be fantastic to see you there. Make sure that you are thinking, how can I share my knowledge? Here's your one awesome project for the next 60 days is to rethink, reinvent yourself. What do you stand for? What do you want to stand for? How can you share what you know so that the other men and women around you are touched, inspired by the work that you have done and that you will do in the future? If I go back to that first question I asked you at the start of this webinar, what are you known for? It's because your reputation counts. Sometimes what I say to people is leadership is what happens when you're not in the room, before coronavirus. What happens when you're not in the room? Do people still keep working on the things that you set for them, the guidance that you offered? Or are people going to watch YouTube videos and things like that? So here's my final question to you. What are you known for? Because if you are happy with what you're known for, then great, go ahead, carry on doing what you were doing. But if you're not so happy with what you're known for, if you're known for your technical professional skills, it's time to make a change. It's time to think, what do I want to be known for? So in thinking about this webinar, I spoke to a few people who I'd shared these questions with before, and there was something they told me that was really fascinating. Excuse me, I'm having a sip of water. Somebody said to me that when they got back to the workplace, they'd shared these questions with their colleagues. And they didn't share them on a single handout, a single piece of paper. They literally sort of read them out in just a few minutes, much as I've done with you today. What am I known for? What do I want to be known for? What's my visibility program? So allow people the time to reflect. And if these questions have had any impact on you, if you've been thinking of certain things, if you've been writing these down, as I hope you have, then maybe some things you've been processing in your mind as you work through. So please share that experience with others. Share these questions with the men and women around you. Get on a webinar, get on a Zoom call, get on a StreamYard event with them and share these questions. Show them that you're caring for them and caring for their career and caring for their trajectory when they get back into the workplace. So share the questions. And I spoke to one of the people who was telling me about this, and he said what he had done is not only shared the questions about what am I known for, what do I want to be known for, but he then had flipped the question to ask, well, these questions also apply to us as a team, to us as a community. What are we known for? What do we want to be known for this time next year? What is our visibility? Because our leadership brand counts. And this is a question I put to our entire community, the entire community on People Matters, the entire community of HR and L&D specialists. What are we known for? And I'm reminded of Dave Ulrich's Human Resource Champions. Many people still today in our community regard HR, L&D as admin experts, as the people who are bureaucrats, who are doing the tedious work that needs to be done. Now, don't get me wrong, that work needs to be done, but we also need to be doing the work of the change agent. We also need to be doing the work of leaders, HR leaders, L&D leaders who are changing the way organizations work. This is a fantastic opportunity we've been given to really reflect on how am I going to play that senior role, whether or not you have the job that goes with it, but that influential role of making our companies and our organizations, and above all our people, feel a part of this community and that they have an amazing role to play. These also are things you should be doing, thinking about in this time that we have, and making a start on through online webinars and events. I'm just double checking the time because I want you to reflect on these final couple of points. Marshall Goldsmith told me some years ago now, he said that the two things that I needed to do to reinvent myself, or to change my story, to change the stories that I tell. And that's why this time has been so brilliant for me, because I've been able to reflect on, if I consider myself a thought leader, and I do, I've written a number of books. If I consider myself a thought leader, then I need to tell more and different stories. And I urge you as thought leaders in the HR and L&D community to think about the stories that you tell about our community and about the companies that you serve and about what you stand for. Story. Thought leaders tell meaningful stories. This is a great opportunity, by the way, those of you out there who ever thought I should write a book. This is a great time to write that book. One of the things you can do is write a book about the skills and experience you have, the stories that you have, but don't get me started on books. Finally, build your brand. As you leave this webinar, I want you to think about your reputation. What can you do in the immediate aftermath in the next 60 days on all of these different elements, your visibility, your network, the stories that you tell? How are you going to tell stories in this lockdown period, but also after the lockdown period? Because please, please, please understand this. Your reputation really matters. And I want you to ask yourself honestly, what are you known for? And what do you want to be known for this time next year? I hope you've been posting some questions in the chat. And maybe my final question to you, and we're so out of time, maybe this could be another webinar for us. Ask yourself, what's your legacy? When you move on from the role that you currently serve, when you move on, what will you leave behind? So I don't think you should leave it until that final day of reckoning when you move into a different role to say, that's what I did. I need you to build your legacy in advance. Start thinking, how can I make a difference? Not only around my family, of course you have a legacy to the family, but you have a legacy to your employer, the employer that you currently serve. You have a legacy to the profession that you occupy, to the industry that you serve, to the region, to India, to the world. This is too big a question to deal with in the few seconds I have left, but let me just ask you this final question. What is your legacy? Listen, John, it's about time that we opened up the chat questions and I took some questions, because I think I'm just about on time, and I hope we've still got time to answer some questions. So let me throw the floor open to you now. What questions have people been posting, and how can I help?
Yeah, hi, Stephen. So there are quite a bit of questions. I'm just going to pose a few of them. One of them from Ravi is, how can one improve or enhance the executive presence at this time? Any insights on that, Stephen?
So firstly, Ravi, thank you for the question. Executive presence is a powerful topic in its own right. And I guess you're thinking about what happens when we get back into the workplace. And that the whole physical presence literally in the room is something we could touch on another webinar. A good friend of mine, Ange Muir, does a whole 2 days on executive presence. So it's not something we can do in this immediate question. However, in the context of this coronavirus time that we have, this wonderful opportunity we have, your executive presence also extends to your online presence. So why not think about becoming even more professional online? Write articles, post items, create small videos of you online. You can record videos on your phone and start to be the person you want to be. When you start a new job, nobody knows you. So you can kind of forget all the ways you used to do things in the past, and you can be the person you want to be. I want you to imagine after this webinar, Ravi, that you're going back to a new role. You're going back to a new world. So be the person you want to be. And I think that at heart of it, self-confidence to some extent is part of that answer. But executive presence, I will pick up on that. I've got a couple of good links to articles that I can send you later on. But be the person you want to be, and don't worry what anybody else thinks of you. That's a very simple answer, but it's not easy to do.
Sure.
Sorry, John.
Rajiv Narang asked this question. Keeping the professional impact in mind, what are the top few things that organizations should do from a people perspective?
Wow. I'm not sure, Rajiv, thank you for the question. It's a great question. How do we deal with professional impact? What can organizations do? I think one of the things, if I'm reading you right, if I interpret this question incorrectly, please, let us know in the chat and I'll answer separately. But if it's about what can organizations do, I think it's to understand that each of the professions that we serve have their own almost identity. We as accountants, we as engineers have an identity. And one of the things that London Business School does that's really, really good is we have a program director community. So those of us who lead programs get together and meet on a regular basis and exchange best practices. So literally offering the space and the time to become even better at what we do as a professional. That would be one way of increasing impact. Another thing that one of the oil companies, I think it was Shell, had what they call a brown bag lunch. They would invite people to a brown bag lunch. You bring your own lunch to a meeting and you just share, these are the things I'm thinking of, these are the issues I'm grappling with, because that interconnecting with other people, not even in your immediate area, is a really powerful thing you can do. So it might have been BP. I will find a link on that and share that with you. That's the shared lunch idea. So organizations need to, I think, help professionals to increase their impact. And one of the ways they can do that is enhance the networking within those different professional groups. I hope I've gone some way towards answering your question, Rajiv. John.
One more, and maybe not related to impact, but here is an interesting question. This is Sahil from BHEL. What changes learning and development may undergo after this phase, after COVID-19? What do you think?
Okay. What changes should L&D? So Sahil, thank you so much for the question. I think this is a question that is so relevant for all of us today.
Yeah.
Because the world has changed. India has changed. Your city has changed. Your village has changed. Firms have changed. And I think a couple of things. Linda Grattan just posted a really fascinating article on virtual working. So I think that one of the trends that we've tried in HR and L&D to do more virtual working, to do more remote engagements. And in a country the size of India, that's surely going to be a really valuable thing to do. So I think that the trend towards virtual working will continue. We are proving that this is a viable and valuable alternative to having everybody just come into the office every single day. But I realize that some of the bureaucratic mentality that exists in some operations of clocking in and clocking off may prevent that happening. But we have lots of evidence now that it's possible. So I think virtual working is something we should continue. I think one of the things that I fear we are grappling with now is emotional well-being, not just physical health at work, but emotional well-being. And clearly, we will need to look at emotional intelligence a lot more, Sahil, and to make sure that we are serving people well. So coaches, mentors, guides, therapists, someone to talk to when the pressure is tough, because it will be tough in the first few weeks once we get back. And I think the final piece of the puzzle is, I don't know how experienced everybody is on the webinar. If you are thinking about your career ahead, you need to be thinking, what will be the pinnacle of my career? If you reach the pinnacle of your career, it's likely to be in the 50s, 50, 55, something like that. So if you are in your 40s, then you are kind of one or two roles away from the pinnacle of your career, whatever that is. We're not all going to make CEO. If you're in your 30s, then you've got 3 or 4 roles before you reach the pinnacle of your career. So Sahil, one of the things I think organizations can do is we have kind of washed our hands of all sorts of career support for people. And we should, I think, maybe not take the reins a bit more, but make it clearer that this information is available to you to help you manage your own career. Some of the questions that we've had today, some of these issues that we faced, that I've covered in this short time we have together, we need to make that material available. I'm not suggesting that we need to all have a subscription to Harvard Business Review. There's enough from Harvard Business Review online for free anyway, the daily, coaching tips and so on. but I'm thinking, how can we help people feel that our organization cares about their future enough to make information available to them so that they stay in the organization? If we are losing talent, then it's our own fault because we're not offering enough information. We're not making people feel there's enough here for them to stay. So I think those would be initial top of mind things, initial thoughts on career, virtual working, and emotional work in the immediate days and weeks after the webinar. So that's pretty much it from me, John. I think I just want to say stay connected. I've just put a quick slide up with my 2 current websites. You can find me on LinkedIn. My website, stevensonsino.com, has a few articles of interest. For those of you thought leaders who are interested in the book, I have a webinar I recorded on how to write your book really, really quickly. That's at bookmasterclass.com. Not everybody will go there, but I just wanted to put it out there for those of you who want to make really great use of this time. Writing a book is a fantastic way forward. Anything else, John?
I think so. We have just a few minutes. I don't know whether we can take this last question, or should I just go ahead? Or
yep, go ahead.
Maybe this is the last question. What is the best way to get accustomed to the new culture in the post-COVID era? And this is asked by Winston Ernest.
Okay, so best way to get
there is a whole new culture coming up, and how can we blend in?
Yes. I think, Winston, it is a superb question, because if you remember, one of the 3 levers that we have is the culture. And the thing that's fascinating about this time is that it's a culture that is going to coalesce. So the organization has been ripped apart and split out into lockdown, and we're all going to come back. So the old forms of collective culture, how we used to operate when we were doing this before, we will have forgotten some of those things. Some of those things that we learned by osmosis will have gone. I hope that some of the hardwired DNA that runs through us will still be there, but we are going to coalesce as a group of individuals. So if I could make a plea, Winston, for you and everybody on this call to reflect on the questions that I've put to you and to think, how can I influence the culture now and before we reconvene, so that when we reconvene, it's a case of just saying, hi, great to meet you. Now let's get on with the work that we planned. I would say start now, Winston. Start now to influence the culture that you want it to be. And that could even be, I'm suggesting, your one awesome project is, how do you prepare a culture landing plan so that when we get back into the organization, we can actually really hit the ground running. So there's a lot more work on culture and culture in remote organizations that we could touch on. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want some more on that. I'm a walking library. It's sad, but it's true. I'm a walking library. I can give you resources on this till the cows come home. Do you have that expression? So thank you for the questions, Rajiv, Sahil, Winston. John, anything else?
I think so. We have only so much time for the day. There are around 27, 28 new questions coming up. Maybe what we can do is let me create a repository of them, and I will take your inputs, and then the XED team can then respond over email, if it's okay with you.
Perfect. So what I propose, if you've asked a question and I haven't been able to get to it because I've been talking too much, I could speak for the British Olympic team. Then I will answer those questions, and XED will make that resource available to you. I might, just for speed, just to speak my answers, I might just record a quick video for you. But let's see how many there are and what they are. I might be able to group them together, and that way, we don't have to. None of us has to spend time listening to 29 answers from me. That would be boring in the extreme. Anything else, John?
No, that's it from us. Thanks so much, Stephen. Any final comments before we say goodbye?
I just want to say, if you are here now and stayed right through to the end, I really acknowledge that. I mean, this is a tough time to allocate to thinking to some extent about work, but I hope you can see that it's up to all of us to think, how can I remain professional? How can I remain focused on being the best I can be, even if you're in lockdown, even if you've been furloughed? And I hope that you got something out of this short time together. I want to thank People Matters for hosting us today. Thank you, Reshma, and John and the team at XEd. If you want more information, by the way, on XEd, they are one of the most powerful agencies in the world on creating executive development and education. And I work with them on some programs around the place. So reach out to John, reach out to Reshma at People Matters if you have any questions for them. If you have any questions for me, you can find me on LinkedIn or via my website. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend this little bit of time with you today. And I'm looking forward to maybe seeing you again at this time next year, if not before. Have a great day, stay safe, and please stay connected.